The sun over Presidio County didn't ask permission before it burned. By 2 in the afternoon, it had already baked the cracked Kalish Road into something that resembled the surface of a forgotten planet, pale, lifeless, and indifferent to everything that moved across it. The mesquite trees along the fence line offered no real shade, just thin, skeletal shadows that stretched uselessly over the dry ground. The air smelled like dust and hot iron, the way it always did in late July in West Texas, when the land reminded you, without apology, that it hadn't been here long before you and would remain long after. Douglas Harding noticed the boy from the kitchen window. He was standing at the main gate of the Harding Ranch, all 412 acres of it, holding the reins of a horse that looked like it had walked straight out of a bad dream. The animal was a paint, brown and white, but the colors had faded under layers of dried sweat and trail dust. Its ribs showed through its coat like fingers pressing from the inside. Its head hung low, and it shifted its weight from one front leg to the other in the slow, reluctant way that horses do when standing has become its own kind of suffering. The boy was small, couldn't have been more than 10 or 11 years old. He wore a faded blue shirt with a tear along the left shoulder seam, jeans that were a size too short, and boots that had lived several lives before reaching his feet. His dark blonde hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat, and he stood with a stillness that was unusual for a child, the kind of stillness that doesn't come from patience, but from exhaustion so deep it has settled into the bones. Douglas set down his coffee mug. He was 61 years old, broad-shouldered, with hands that looked like they'd been carved from the same oak as the fence posts he'd spent a lifetime driving into this earth. His face was the color of old saddle leather lined deep round the eyes and mouth, the kind of face that had earned every crease honestly. He wore his silver hair cut short, a plain white shirt tucked into worn Wranglers, and boots that were identical in quality to the ones he'd been wearing since he was 30, because when you found something that worked, you didn't change it. He was not a man given to sentimentality. He had built this ranch with his father, buried his father on this land, buried his wife on this land, and had come very close, 7 years ago, to burying himself in a bottle of bourbon and never coming back out. He had survived all of that by being practical, by keeping his hands busy and his feelings filed away in a place he rarely visited. But something about the boy at the gate made him put on his hat and walk outside. The gravel crunched under his boots as he crossed the yard. The boy heard him coming and straightened slightly, not in a defensive way, but in the way of someone who has been taught that respect costs nothing and that you show it whether you feel like it or not. "Afternoon," Douglas said, stopping a few feet from the gate. "Afternoon, sir," the boy said. His voice was quiet but clear. He met Douglas's eyes without flinching, which Douglas noticed. Children who'd been knocked around a lot either stared too hard or looked away too fast. This boy just looked steady, cautious, honest. "You lost?" Douglas asked. "No, sir. I know where I am." He paused. "I'm on Route 67, about 9 miles south of Marfa." "That's right." Douglas looked at the horse. The animal's nostrils were flared, its breathing labored, but not panicked. It was dehydrated, seriously dehydrated. "Where'd you come from? Started outside of Alpine this morning." Douglas did the math in his head. That was close to 30 miles. He looked at the boy again. "You walked 30 miles in this heat?" "Rode most of it. But Rio's been struggling the last few miles. I've been walking beside him to take the weight off." Rio. The horse had a name. Douglas noted that too. "Where are you headed?" The boy hesitated for the first time. Not evasively, more like someone choosing which truth to offer from a pile of them. "Presidio. Got an uncle there. He said I could stay with him a while." Douglas studied him. "A while meaning what exactly?" "Meaning I'm not sure yet, sir." There was a long pause. A hawk circled high overhead, riding a thermal with no apparent purpose other than the pleasure of it. The horse shifted again, and the boy turned instinctively to check on it, running one hand along its neck in a gesture so automatic and tender it clearly came from years of habit. "What's your name?" Douglas asked. Caleb Morrison, Douglas Harding. He didn't offer his hand through the fence, just said it plainly. What do you need, Caleb Morrison? The boy reached up and adjusted Rio's bridle strap, a small, nervous gesture. Then he looked up at Douglas with an expression that was hard to categorize. It wasn't shame, exactly. It wasn't pride, either. It was something quieter and more complicated than either of those things. Water for my horse, sir, if you can spare it. He paused. If you've got any runoff from the cattle troughs, that'd be fine. I'm not asking for drinking water, just whatever's left over, whatever you'd otherwise let drain. Douglas stared at him. Dirty water, the boy clarified, as if Douglas hadn't understood. I'm not asking for anything good, just what you don't need. The words landed somewhere in Douglas Harding's chest and didn't immediately leave. Just what you don't need. He had 47 cattle on this property. He had 3 functioning water troughs, each refilled by an automatic pump twice a day. He had a well that had never run dry in 60 years. He had water to spare in quantities this boy couldn't imagine. And this child, this small, dust-covered, exhausted child who had walked 30 miles in a Texas July, was asking permission to use his runoff. Douglas reached over and unlatched the gate. Bring him through, he said. The boy blinked. Sir, your horse. Bring him in. The trough by the barn is full and clean, and he's welcome to all of it. Caleb Morrison didn't move for a moment. It seemed like he was running the offer through some internal checklist, verifying it against previous experiences with generosity that had turned out to be something else entirely. Then, slowly, he led Rio through the gate. Douglas watched the horse move, worse than he'd thought from a distance. The animal was exhausted and dehydrated, but underneath the dust and the gauntness, there was structure, good bone, decent conformation. Someone had once taken care of this horse. That someone was no longer around or no longer able to. They walked to the barn in silence. When Rio reached the trough, the horse drank in long, desperate pulls, and Caleb stood beside him with one hand on his neck, watching with an expression of focused relief. Not relief for himself, Douglas noticed. Relief for the animal. When did you last have water? Douglas asked. This morning before we left. I carried a bottle. For yourself or for the horse? Caleb looked at him steadily. For Rio. Douglas turned away and walked toward the barn door. Come inside, out of the sun. I don't want to be a bother, sir. Once Rio's had enough, we'll get back on the road. It's 104 degrees, Douglas said without turning around. You're not going anywhere for a couple of hours. Come inside. The inside of the barn was 10 degrees cooler than the yard. Not comfortable, but survivable. It smelled of hay, horse, leather, and the particular dry wood scent of old structures that have absorbed decades of sun. Douglas pulled 2 bottles of water from the small refrigerator he kept near the tack room and handed one to the boy. Caleb took it and said thank you before he opened it. He drank slowly, methodically, not gulping the way a truly desperate person would. Self-control, Douglas thought. Conscious self-control. That wasn't natural in an 11-year-old. That was learned. How old are you? Douglas asked, settling onto a hay bale. 11, 12, in September. Who knows you're out here on this road? A pause. My uncle's expecting me in Presidio. That's not what I asked. Caleb turned the water bottle in his hands. I know what you asked. They looked at each other. The boy didn't look away. Where are your parents, Caleb? The question sat between them for a long moment. Outside, Rio was still drinking. A barn swallow shot through the open door, banked hard, and disappeared into the rafters. My mom passed 14 months ago, Caleb said. Ovarian cancer. It went fast once it started. I'm sorry. My dad. He stopped, started again. My dad has his own problems. We've been staying at different places since Mom died. He's with his sister in Odessa right now. It wasn't working for me to stay there. Douglas had been around long enough to know how much those words were carrying and how much they were leaving unsaid. Wasn't working for me to stay there. He didn't push it. So you decided to ride to Presidio by yourself. Yes, sir. On a horse that was already underweight when you started. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. Rio was the only option. And he's stronger than he looks. He's dehydrated, and his right front shoe is loose. He shouldn't cover another 9 miles today. The boy said nothing, but Douglas saw the information land, the quiet recalculation happening behind those steady eyes. There's a stall at the end of the barn, Douglas said. It's clean. Your horse can stay the night, get fed and watered properly, and you can get back on the road tomorrow morning before the heat builds. Caleb looked at him with that same cautious assessment he'd shown at the gate. Why? He asked. It was such a direct question, and asked so without aggression, that Douglas found himself momentarily without a prepared answer. Because it's the right thing to do, he said finally. People don't always do the right thing, Caleb said. Not bitterly, just as a statement of observed fact. No, Douglas agreed. They don't, but I'm doing it today. Another long pause. Rio had finished drinking and was standing with his head slightly raised now, ears moving with returning alertness. Already better, just from water and shade. Thank you, Mr. Harding, Caleb said, quietly. I'll earn it. I can clean stalls, fix fence, whatever you need done before I leave tomorrow. Douglas looked at the boy, really looked at him, and something moved in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. Something that had no clean name, but that lived in the neighborhood of recognition. We'll see, he said. Let's get your horse settled first. Margaret Okafor arrived at 4:15, as she did every Tuesday and Thursday, driving her 10-year-old Chevy Silverado up the ranch road with the practiced ease of someone who had made this drive over 200 times. She was 54, Nigerian-American, with close-cropped natural hair going silver at the temples and the kind of efficient, no-nonsense energy that Douglas had come to rely on completely since she'd taken over managing the ranch's books and operations 3 years ago. She stepped out of the truck and stopped when she saw the paint horse in the yard, now groomed and tied in the shade of the big live oak by the barn. Douglas was coming out of the barn behind a boy she had never seen before. Who's this? She asked, looking between them. Margaret Okafor. This is Caleb Morrison. He's going to be staying the night. Margaret looked at the boy with sharp, kind eyes. Took in the worn clothes, the dried sweat, the boots that were too big, the quietly careful way he stood. Her expression didn't change, but something in it soft. Have you eaten today? She asked him directly. Yes, ma'am. What did you eat? A fractional hesitation. I had some crackers this morning. Crackers, Margaret repeated flatly. She turned to Douglas. I'm making dinner. You don't have to, Douglas began. I'm making dinner, she said again, and walked toward the house. Douglas glanced at Caleb, who was watching her with a small, involuntary smile. The first smile Douglas had seen from him, just a flicker, gone as quickly as it appeared. She's something, Caleb said. Yes, Douglas agreed. She really is. That night, sitting at the long wooden table in Douglas Harding's kitchen, eating Margaret's chicken and rice and drinking sweet tea from a glass that was bigger than his hands, Caleb Morrison said very little. But his eyes moved constantly, taking in the photographs on the wall, the worn Bible on the counter, the collection of rodeo buckles in a shadow box by the door, the general texture of a life that was old and full and rooted in this ground. Douglas watched him without appearing to. There was a photograph on the wall above the sideboard that Caleb looked at twice. Douglas knew the photograph well. He knew every detail of it, the summer light, the red barn behind, the easy grin of a 17-year-old boy sitting on a fence rail with a saddle on his lap. His son, Nathan, taken 8 years ago. 14 months before Nathan Harding drove his truck into a utility pole on Route 90 at 2 in the morning, at a speed that left nothing ambiguous about what had happened, and left his father sitting in a hospital parking lot in Alpine for 6 hours waiting for a confirmation that he had already received. Douglas picked up his fork and looked at his plate. The food is really good, Caleb said quietly. to no one in particular. Told you, Margaret said. Outside, the Texas night had settled in, big and dark, and blanketed with more stars than most people ever get to see. The horse was in the barn, the boy was at the table, and Douglas Harding, for the first time in longer than he could clearly remember, did not eat dinner alone. Caleb was up before sunrise. Douglas found him at 5:45, already in the barn, working with a stiff bristled brush along Rio's coat in slow, methodical strokes. The horse stood with its eyes half closed, leaning slightly into the pressure, with the contented passivity of an animal being cared for properly. The morning was still cool, the sky outside the barn door a deep indigo fading toward pale orange at the horizon, and the only sounds were the brush strokes, the soft shuffle of horse feet on straw, and the distant call of a curve-billed thrasher somewhere in the mesquite. "You didn't have to do that," Douglas said from the doorway. Caleb kept brushing. "I know. But Rio likes it, and I said I'd work for what we used." Douglas leaned against the doorframe and crossed his arms. The boy had slept in the spare room, Margaret had insisted, overriding Douglas's vague plan to offer the couch, and apparently had slept well enough, because he looked more alert now than he had at dinner, less hollowed out. "How long have you had him?" Douglas asked, nodding toward Rio. "Since I was 7. He was my mom's before that." Caleb moved the brush to Rio's shoulder. She got him from a rescue outfit outside of Fort Davis. He was in pretty bad shape when they got him. She spent almost 2 years rehabilitating him before she let me ride him alone. Your mother knew horses. She grew up on a ranch in New Mexico, near Carrizozo. A pause. She said horses were the most honest animals on earth because they couldn't hide how they felt. Said you could learn more about a person in 10 minutes watching them handle a horse than in 10 years of conversation. Douglas said nothing. He was thinking about that, turning it over the way you turn a coin between your fingers. "She sounds like she was a smart woman," he said. "She was the smartest person I ever knew. No self-pity in it. Just a clean, quiet statement of fact, the way you might describe the color of the sky." Douglas pushed off the doorframe. "Come have breakfast when you're done. Then I'll check Rio's shoe before you head out." Breakfast was eggs, toast, and coffee. Douglas made it himself, Margaret not being due until afternoon. Caleb ate everything on his plate with the focused appreciation of someone who doesn't know when the next good meal is coming and intends to honor the one in front of him. He didn't eat frantically. He ate carefully, which Douglas thought might be worse to witness than desperation. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, and Douglas did something he hadn't done with a stranger in a long time. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. Caleb Morrison's story came out in pieces, offered without drama and without the expectation of sympathy. His mother, Patricia Morrison, had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer when Caleb was 9. The diagnosis was late stage 3, and the treatment was aggressive and expensive, and ultimately insufficient. She had died 14 months ago in an Alpine hospice facility, holding her son's hand and telling him that the most important thing a person could do was decide, every single morning, what kind of person they were going to be that day. His father, Ray Morrison, was not a bad man, Caleb said carefully. He was a man who had loved his wife completely and had not, in the years since her death, found a way to keep himself functional without her. He was drinking. He was working when he could, but the drinking was getting in the way of the working, and the result was a rotation through various family members' homes, his sister in Odessa, a cousin in Pecos, with Caleb in tow, each stay ending when it became too complicated to continue. "Does he know where you are right now?" Douglas asked. Caleb wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. He took it with a lot of sugar, no cream. "I left a note. Said I was going to Uncle Pete's in Presidio and that I'd call when I got there. And your Uncle Pete, he's expecting you?" I called him from a gas station in Alpine before I left. He said, "Come on. He know you were riding?" I didn't tell him that part. Douglas rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Caleb, I know." The boy said it without defensiveness. I know it wasn't the smartest plan. But I needed to get out of Odessa, and I needed to take Rio because there was nowhere to leave him, and I wasn't leaving him." He paused. "Some things you just don't leave behind." The kitchen was quiet for a moment. A truck passed on Route 67 in the distance, its sound rising and fading like a wave. "How much do you know about ranch work?" Douglas asked. Caleb looked up. "Enough. I've been working part-time at different places since I was 9. Feedlots mostly, and a couple of small operations near Alpine. I can drive a tractor, mend wire fence, handle cattle in a pen. I'm not fast, but I'm careful." "Careful beats fast most of the time," Douglas said. It came out as an observation, not a compliment, but Caleb received it like one. A slight straightening of the spine, the tiniest relaxation around the eyes. Douglas stood up and carried his plate to the sink. He stood there for a moment with his back to the room, looking out the kitchen window at the land. The morning light was fully up now, pale, gold, and enormous, stretching out over the Kalish Flats and the distant purple shape of the Sinate Mountains, like something sacred and indifferent at the same time. He was thinking about something he hadn't let himself think about directly in a very long time. He was thinking about the spare bedroom that had been sitting empty for 7 years. He was thinking about a 17-year-old boy in a photograph above the sideboard, and about the particular weight of a house that has rooms in it that no one uses anymore. He turned around. "I need a hand around this place for the next few weeks," he said. "Fencing on the north pasture needs work, and I've got a water line that's been giving me trouble near the east boundary. Margaret handles the books, but there's nobody doing the day labor right now." He paused. "Your Uncle Pete's place, is that a permanent situation?" Caleb considered the question honestly. He said, "I could stay, but he lives in a one-bedroom apartment above a hardware store. It's not," he stopped, "it's kind of him. But it's not a long-term thing." "I'm not offering a long-term thing," Douglas said quickly, and he heard himself say it quickly and thought about why. "I'm offering 2 or 3 weeks. Honest work, honest pay, meals included. Give your horse time to recover properly, and give yourself time to figure out next steps. That's all this is." Caleb looked at him for a long moment with those clear, steady eyes. "Why?" he asked again. The same word as yesterday. The same tone, not suspicious, not challenging, just genuinely asking. "Because I need the help," Douglas said, "and because the work is real and so's the pay." The boy nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Harding." "Douglas." "Thank you, Douglas." Margaret Okafor arrived that afternoon to find Caleb Morrison on his knees in the north pasture, pulling old fence staples out of rotting posts with a claw hammer, a bucket of new staples beside him, a roll of wire nearby, and a look of focused concentration on his face that she recognized immediately. It was the look of someone working hard enough to not have to think. She stood at the fence line and watched him for a moment before he noticed her. "You know how to set a corner post?" she asked. He looked up. "Yes, ma'am, my mom showed me." Margaret nodded. "Douglas has got a post driver on the tractor. I'll show you where he keeps it." "I can figure it out, I'm sure you can. I'm offering to make it easier." She tilted her head slightly. "There's no harm in letting people help you, Caleb." He held her gaze for a moment, and something passed across his face, a complicated emotion that was gone almost as soon as it appeared. He stood up, brushed the dirt off his knees, and said, "I know. I'm still learning that." Margaret looked at him carefully. "How old are you?" 11. She shook her head slowly, not in disapproval, but in the way of someone recalibrating their understanding of something. "Come on," she said. "I'll show you the tractor." Over the following 3 days, a loose rhythm established itself at the Harding Ranch. Caleb was up before Douglas each morning. All was already working by the time Douglas got outside. Small tasks he'd identified the evening before and committed to silently. A gate latch that needed tightening, a feed bucket that needed scrubbing, a section of water trough that had developed a green algae line along the inside edge. He worked steadily and without complaint in heat that would have driven grown men inside. He asked questions that were specific and practical. What's the spacing on this wire? How deep do you want these posts? Should I treat this wood before I set it? And he absorbed the answers without needing to be told twice. Douglas found himself explaining things, not because the boy demanded explanation, but because the quality of Caleb's attention made explanation feel worthwhile in a way it hadn't in a long time. When Douglas talked about how to read cattle behavior, about why the East Water Line ran where it did, about the way weather moved across the Chihuahuan Desert in patterns his father had taught him and his father's father before that, Caleb listened with his whole body, the way children are supposed to listen and rarely do. On the third evening, sitting on the porch, watching the sun go down behind the Chinatus, Douglas said, "Your uncle know you're still here. I called him the first day. Told him I was helping out at a ranch near Marfay for a couple of weeks. He was fine with it." A pause. He seemed relieved, honestly. Douglas let that sit without comment. "The fencing looks good," he said instead. "Better than good, actually. You've got an eye for line tension." Caleb pulled his knees up to his chest and looked at the mountains. "My mom used to say that fence work is about respect. You're telling the land where the line is. It should be straight and it should be honest." He paused. She had a way of making everything mean something. Sounds like it. She would have liked this place. He said it simply, without grief in his voice, or rather, with the grief so thoroughly integrated into how he spoke about her that it had become indistinguishable from the love. She liked Big Sky. "Not much bigger than this." "No," Caleb agreed. "Not much." They sat in silence as the sky turned from orange to deep pink to the first gray of evening. Douglas thought about what he'd been avoiding thinking about for 3 days, the conversation he needed to have with himself about what he was doing and why, about whether this was generosity or something needier and more complicated, about whether a 61-year-old widower with a dead son's empty room and a lifetime of stored grief had any business making decisions about an 11-year-old boy who wasn't his responsibility. He didn't reach any conclusions that evening. He just sat on the porch and watched the Sinati Mountains go dark, and the boy sat beside him, and neither of them said anything else until the stars came out. On the 5th day, Ray Morrison called. Douglas was in the barn when he heard it, Caleb's voice from the yard, higher than usual with a tension in it that carried. Douglas stayed where he was, not wanting to intrude, but he couldn't help hearing fragments through the open barn door. "I'm fine, Dad. I'm fine. Working. At a ranch near Marfa. I know you were worried. I left a note." Then a longer silence, with only Caleb's end audible. Dad, listen. You need to." A pause. I know you're trying." Then, quietly, "I love you too. Yeah, I'll call again Sunday." Douglas came out of the barn 10 minutes after the call ended. Caleb was sitting on the top rail of the corral fence, looking at Rio in the pen below. His posture was the same as always, straight, controlled, but something had shifted around his eyes. "Everything okay?" Douglas asked. "He's sober right now," Caleb said, not turning around. "He's trying again. He checked into an outpatient program in Odessa." A pause. He sounded like himself. "That's good news." "Yeah." A long beat. "He always sounds like himself when he's sober. That's the thing." He touched Rio's neck as the horse ambled over. "It's hard to know which version is going to be there when you need him." Douglas leaned against the fence beside the boy and said nothing. There was nothing useful to add. Some truths about parents and children, and the specific heartbreak of loving someone who keeps failing you. There were no words for that didn't diminish it. After a while, Caleb said, "Did you have kids, Douglas?" The question came gently, but it arrived like a hand pressing on a bruise. "One," Douglas said. "A son." "What happened?" The question was asked with the directness that children sometimes have, not cruelty, just the honest assumption that questions deserve answers. "He died," Douglas said. 7 years ago." Caleb turned to look at him. His expression was not the stricken, oversympathetic face that adults usually made. It was something quieter and more respectful than that. "I'm sorry," he said. Just those 2 words, plainly. "Thank you," Douglas said. "Was he like you?" Douglas exhaled slowly through his nose. "Not much. He was louder, funnier. He filled a room in a way I never could. He looked at the mountains. He had his mother's smile." "Your wife, she died too?" "Cancer. 9 years ago." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "You've had a lot of loss," he said. "I have. Are you okay?" Douglas looked at the boy, this small, serious, dust-covered kid sitting on a fence rail asking a 61-year-old man, "Are you okay?" Without irony, without agenda, simply because he wanted to know. "Some days," Douglas said honestly. "Better some days than others." Caleb nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." Margaret came to Douglas privately that Friday evening while Caleb was with Rio in the barn. "You know you're not going to let him go to Presidio," she said. She wasn't asking. "I don't know what I'm doing," Douglas said. "I think you do." "Margaret, he's an 11-year-old boy, Douglas. He walked 30 miles in a Texas summer with a sick horse because there was nowhere better to go." She set down the folder of invoices she'd been carrying and looked at him squarely. "He's been here 5 days, and he's done more useful work than most grown men I've hired, and he's done it without being asked twice and without complaining once. And every morning he gets up before anyone else and checks on that horse before he does anything else." Douglas said nothing. "He's not Nathan," she said more quietly. "I know that. Do you?" "Yes," he said it firmly. "I know exactly who he is. He's Caleb Morrison, and he's 11 years old, and his situation is complicated, and I'm not his father, and I'm not trying to be." "Then what are you trying to be?" The question hung in the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. The last of the evening light came through the window above the sink and fell across the worn linoleum floor. "Someone who didn't close the gate," Douglas said finally. Margaret held his gaze for a long moment. Then she picked up her folder. "Called Pete Morrison in Presidio," she said. "Talk to the father in Odessa. Find out what's actually going on before that boy shows up on someone else's doorstep." She moved toward the door and called Jim Rayfield. Jim Rayfield was a family attorney in Marfa. Douglas had used him twice, once for the ranch trust, once for a property dispute with a neighbor. "Margaret, call Jim Rayfield," she said again, and walked out. 3 things happened in the second week that changed everything. The first was the cattle. Douglas ran a modest operation, 47 Angus Cross cattle, mostly for beef, with a handful of older cows he kept out of loyalty rather than profit. On the Tuesday of Caleb's second week, Douglas and the boy drove out to the east pasture in the old Ford to check on a section of fence that had been giving trouble, and they found 6 head of cattle bunched at the southeast corner in a way that immediately told Douglas something was wrong. "Stay in the truck," he said, and got out. It took him 4 minutes to find the cause. A section of fence had been deliberately cut, not broken, not worn through, but cut, with wire cutters in 2 places, leaving a gap wide enough for cattle to pass through. His cattle hadn't gone through yet, but someone else's cattle had come in. 6 head of branded stock that didn't match any brand Douglas recognized, now mixed in with his animals. He stood at the fence line for a long moment, reading the ground. Boot prints. Tire tracks from a pickup on the other side headed south. "That's not an accident," Caleb said from behind him. Douglas turned. The boy had gotten out of the truck. "I said stay in, I know what you said." Caleb was looking at the cut wire with the same careful, analytical attention he brought to everything. "Someone drove here and cut it and pushed cattle through. The tracks are from last night. See how the dew hasn't settled back into the impressions? That's recent." Douglas looked at the tracks and then at the boy. "Where'd you learn to read ground like that?" "My mom. She hunted and she used to take me." He crouched down beside the nearest print. Whoever this was, they weren't trying to hide. They didn't cover the tracks. This was meant to be found, or they didn't care if it was. Douglas took out his phone and called the Presidio County Sheriff's Department. While they waited, Caleb helped him do a full count of the herd. all 47 accounted for, plus the 6 interlopers. By the time Deputy Anita Flores arrived 40 minutes later, Caleb had documented the cut fence sections with Douglas's phone camera, measured the tire track width, and sketched a rough map of the scene in the small notebook he apparently carried everywhere. Deputy Flores looked at the boy's notebook with undisguised surprise. "How old are you?" she asked. 11. "You do this kind of documentation regularly? I just thought someone should write it down before it got messed up." Flores looked at Douglas with an expression that was half professional assessment and half something softer. "He's right," she said. "This is good documentation." She looked at the notebook again. "You want a job?" Caleb didn't smile, but his eyes did briefly. After Flores left with the trespassing cattle's brand identified as belonging to a rancher named Boyd Calloway, who operated about 12 miles to the south, and with a promise to look into the fence cutting, Douglas drove back to the ranch house in silence. Caleb watched the landscape pass outside the truck window. After several miles, he said, "Who's Boyd Calloway?" Douglas's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "A man I've had disagreements with. About water rights, grazing leases, the usual." A pause. "He's been trying to buy this land for 4 years. I've said no 4 times. So he's cutting your fence to make trouble. Maybe. Or to send cattle through so he can accuse me of stealing them. Or just to remind me he can." Douglas shook his head slightly. "Boyd Calloway is a man who thinks patience is for people who don't have other options. Does he have other options?" Douglas glanced at the boy. "He has money. Money is its own option." Caleb absorbed this. "What are you going to do? Fix the fence, document the damage, let Anita Flores do her job?" He paused. "And keep my eyes open." The second thing that happened was the phone call from Ray Morrison. It came on Wednesday evening, and this time Douglas answered it. Caleb had asked him to the day before. "You the man who's been putting my boy up?" The voice was rough, careful, the voice of a man choosing each word like he was stepping across ice. "Yes," Douglas said. "Douglas Harding. I run a cattle ranch on Route 67 south of Marfa. Ray Morrison." A pause. "He behaving. He's been exemplary. Best help I've had in years." Another pause, longer. "He's a good kid." It came out weighted, like more than a statement of fact. "He is," Douglas agreed. "I'm not a good father right now." The words were delivered with a directness that surprised Douglas. No softening, no excuse. "I know what I am right now, and I know it's not good enough for him. I'm working on it hard." A short, ragged exhale. "But I'm not there yet." Douglas sat in the silence of that for a moment. "Mr. Morrison," he said carefully, "I'm not trying to interfere in your family. What Caleb has with you is his, and I respect that. But he's a remarkable boy, and he deserves stability while you get yourself right. If you're willing, and if it sits right with you, I'd like him to stay here a while longer. Do real work, get proper meals, keep his horse with him." A pause, no strings, no agenda, just somewhere steady. The silence on the other end lasted a long time. "He happy there?" Ray Morrison finally asked. Douglas thought about the boy on the fence rail watching the sunset, about his hands on the horse's neck, about the way he ate carefully and worked methodically and asked, "Are you okay?" because he genuinely wanted to know. "I think he's finding something steady," Douglas said. "Yes." Another long pause. "Okay," Ray Morrison said. "Okay, but I call every Sunday, and he calls me if he needs to. And when I'm ready, when I'm actually ready, I come get him. You don't keep him from that." "On my word," Douglas said. "Your word better be good, Mr. Harding." "It is," Douglas said. "On this land, it is." The third thing, the one that changed the texture of everything, happened on Thursday night. Caleb had been in the barn late, later than usual, and Douglas had gone to check on him at 9:30. He found the boy asleep in the stall next to Rios, curled on a saddle blanket with his back against the wooden partition, and his arms stretched out so that his fingers rested against Rios' stall door, close enough that the horse could have touched them if he chose. Douglas stood in the barn doorway for a long moment, not going in. He was thinking about something Margaret had said. He's not Nathan, he knew that. He had told her he knew that, and he had meant it. Caleb Morrison was not a replacement for Nathan Harding, was not a second chance at fatherhood, was not a redemption narrative that Douglas had constructed for himself out of grief and loneliness, but he was also real. Entirely, complicatedly real, sleeping in his barn with his arm reached out toward his horse. 11 years old and already intimately familiar with loss and uncertainty, and the specific exhaustion of managing the world without adequate support. Douglas walked quietly to the tack room, retrieved a proper wool blanket from the shelf, came back to the stall, and laid it over the boy without waking him. Rio moved slightly and looked at Douglas with large, dark, undemanding eyes. "I know," Douglas said quietly to the horse, "I know." He walked back to the house. He sat at the kitchen table for a while without turning on any lights. Then he picked up his phone and called Jim Rayfield. "Jim," he said when the attorney answered, "I need to talk to you about something. It's not urgent, not an emergency, but it's important." "Sure, Douglas. What's going on?" "I need to understand what it looks like," Douglas said, "when someone wants to provide stable housing and support for a minor child. Informally, what the legal considerations are, what the right way to do it looks like." There was a brief pause on Jim Rayfield's end. "Is this a specific situation?" "Yes, I'll need some details, I know. When can you meet?" "Friday at 2, Jim said. "Come to the office." "I'll be there," Douglas said. "Thank you, Jim." He hung up, sat in the dark kitchen for a while longer, and then went to bed. For the first time in several weeks, he slept straight through the night. Boyd Calloway showed up on a Friday morning, 12 days into Caleb's stay at the Harding Ranch. He came in at Black Ram 3500, clean, new, conspicuously expensive, and he drove it through the main gate without calling ahead and without being invited. Douglas saw the truck from the porch and recognized it immediately. He set down his coffee and stood up. Caleb came out of the barn and stopped when he saw the truck. "Go inside," Douglas said quietly without looking at him. "I can, Caleb, inside." The boy went inside. Douglas walked down the porch steps and across the yard to meet Calloway as the man stepped out of the truck. Boyd Calloway was 55, thick through the shoulders, with a reddish complexion that spoke of decades of sun and probably a fair amount of whiskey. He wore clean work clothes that had never seen actual work, and his boots were expensive enough to have been polished this morning before he put them on. He had the private confidence of a man who had been told yes enough times to start confusing it with inevitability. "Douglas," he said, by way of greeting. "Boyd." Douglas stopped 10 feet away. "You want to tell me what you're doing driving onto my property without so much as a phone call?" "Just came by to talk." Calloway spread his hands in a gesture of openness that didn't reach his eyes. "Neighborly, that's all." "You cut my fence last week." Calloway's expression didn't change. "I don't know anything about that." "Deputy Flores found your brand on the cattle that came through." "Cattle get loose, Douglas. It's a ranch." A practiced shrug. "I've already offered to pay for whatever fence damage there was. Consider this a personal apology, neighbor to neighbor." "I'll consider it when Anita Flores is done with her investigation." Calloway looked past Douglas toward the house, and something shifted in his expression. A calculation, not well disguised. "Who's the kid?" he asked. Douglas said nothing. Saw him come out of the barn. Calloway's tone was light, conversational, but with an edge under it like a blade under cloth. "Didn't know you had family visiting. That's not your concern. Just making conversation." Calloway looked at Douglas directly. "Look, I'll get to the point since we're both busy men. I want this land, Douglas. You know that. I've been patient. I've made fair offers. I'm prepared to make a very good offer right now. Number that'll let you go anywhere you want and live very comfortably for the rest of your life." The answer is no. You haven't heard the number. Doesn't matter what the number is. This land belonged to my father and his father before him, and it's not for sale. Douglas met Calloway's gaze without blinking. It has never been for sale, and it will never be for sale. That answer isn't going to change. Calloway studied him for a moment. Then he smiled, not warmly. People change their minds, he said. Circumstances change. Things happen that make people reassess what they thought was permanent. He looked again toward the house briefly. You should think about whether you're comfortable with your current situation. A man alone out here, no family. He paused, complications arising. The implication was not subtle. Douglas felt something cold and clear settle over him. Not fear, but the calm that sometimes comes just before serious confrontation. Boyd, he said, slowly and distinctly. If anything happens on this property, to the fens, to the cattle, to any person on this land, I will hold you personally responsible, and I will make sure that Anita Flores, Jim Rayfield, and every relevant party knows exactly what I think happened and exactly why. Are we clear? Calloway said nothing for a moment. You're a stubborn man, he said finally. I am, Douglas agreed. Get off my property. Calloway got back in his truck. He turned it around slowly, more slowly than necessary, and drove back out the gate. Douglas watched until the truck disappeared around the first bend in the road. He stood in the yard for another minute, letting the calm settle back into its usual place. Then he went inside. Caleb was at the kitchen table. He had not, it was immediately clear, gone to the living room or any other interior room. He had sat down at the kitchen table where he could see the window that faced the yard, and he had watched. Douglas sat down across from him. That's Boyd Calloway, Caleb said. Yes, he wants the ranch, he does, and he's not going to stop. Douglas looked at the boy, at the eyes that had already seen enough of how the world worked to recognize a man like Calloway on sight, and name what he was doing without needing to be told. No, Douglas said. He's probably not going to stop. Then what do? I stay. I document everything. I make sure the right people know what's happening. I don't give him any reason to escalate, and I don't back down. He held the boy's gaze, and I take care of what's mine. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Am I a complication? He asked. He looked at the house when he talked about complications. Douglas considered his answer carefully, because the boy deserved a careful answer. You're not a complication, he said. You're a person. And people aren't complications. He might try to use me, use my being here. He might try to create a problem for you, with authorities, or with my dad. He might. Douglas kept his voice level. I spoke with Jim Rayfield yesterday about the proper way to document your arrangement here, with your father's knowledge and consent, everything above board. There's no angle Calloway can use if everything is handled correctly. Caleb absorbed this. You talked to a lawyer about me? Yes, before or after he showed up before. Another pause. You knew he might try something. I knew it was possible. I believe in being prepared. Caleb looked at his hands on the table. They were not clean hands anymore. They were ranch hands, with calluses forming at the bases of the fingers, and a persistent line of dark grime under the nails that scrubbing only partially addressed. He turned them over and looked at them, this boy who was 12 in September, and something in his expression was older than his age and younger than it had any right to be simultaneously. Douglas, he said without looking up. Yeah, why is this place worth fighting for? Douglas thought about the question, really thought about it the way it deserved. Because my father built it, he said finally. Because my mother planted the 2 live oaks by the front gate, and I've watched them grow for 60 years. Because my son is buried in the family plot on the East Rise, and my wife beside him, and the only way I can be near them is if I'm here. He paused, because some things are worth keeping even when keeping them is hard. Especially then. Caleb looked up. His eyes were bright but steady. Okay, he said quietly. What do we do? The word landed softly and settled in the room. Today? Douglas said. We finish the north fence. Then I want to put cameras on the main gate and the east pasture access. Margaret's already ordered them. And tonight I'm going to write down everything Calloway said exactly as he said it, and sign and date it. Caleb was already standing up. I'll get the fencing tools, he said. The cameras arrived the next afternoon. Margaret installed the main gate unit herself with the efficiency of someone who had watched enough YouTube tutorials to qualify as an expert, and Douglas and Caleb handled the east pasture camera together, running the cable along the existing fence line and mounting the unit on a post that had line of sight to the access point where the fence had been cut. The work was physical and repetitive, and neither of them talked much during it. But the silence between them had changed from the first day. It was easy now. The silence of people who have learned each other's rhythms and no longer need to fill space with words. They ate dinner on the porch that evening. Margaret had brought enchiladas, because she occasionally did things like that without explanation, and they watched a summer storm build on the western horizon, the lightning moving silently through the purple clouds at a distance too great for thunder. "My mom liked lightning," Caleb said. "Your mom liked a lot of things," Douglas said. "She did." He smiled slightly. "She said the world was too interesting to spend time being bored or mean." She was right about that. She was right about most things. Margaret was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Have you thought about school?" The question shifted the atmosphere on the porch slightly. Caleb looked at her. "What about school? It starts in 6 weeks. Are you enrolled somewhere? Presidio, Alpine? Marfa has a good district." Caleb looked at Douglas. Douglas looked at Caleb. It was the question that had been living underneath every conversation for almost 2 weeks, the one that neither of them had named directly, because naming it meant deciding something that neither of them had formally decided yet. "I haven't," Caleb began. "Your father would need to enroll you," Margaret said, matter-of-factly, "or a legal guardian. It's paperwork, but it's not complicated." She picked up her fork. "Marfa High School feeds into a good district. The elementary and middle school are both solid." She said nothing else. She ate her enchiladas and looked at the lightning on the horizon and appeared to be completely at peace with having dropped that particular stone into still water and walked away from the ripples. Caleb looked at Douglas again. Douglas cleared his throat. "Jim Rayfield thinks," he started, then stopped, then started again. "We talked about what's called a voluntary placement agreement. It's an arrangement with your father's consent that it gives a child a stable home base while the parent is addressing personal issues. It's not adoption. It doesn't remove any parental rights. It's just formal, above board, legal." Caleb was very still. "Did you talk to my dad about this?" "Not specifically. Not yet. I told him I wanted you to stay while he got back on his feet. He agreed to that." Douglas held the boy's gaze. "But I didn't use the legal language yet. That conversation needs to happen with you in it." Caleb looked at the lightning for a long time. "He loves me," he said finally. "My dad, he really does. I know that. He's just not, he can't right now. I know. And this isn't," he stopped. His voice was very controlled. "This wouldn't mean I'm giving up on him coming back." "No," Douglas said. "It wouldn't mean that." Another long silence. The storm crept closer, and now they could hear the first distant rumbles of thunder, the sound arriving late like an afterthought. "Can I think about it?" Caleb asked. "Take all the time you need," Douglas said. Caleb nodded. He wrapped both hands around his glass of sweet tea and watched the storm come in. And Douglas Harding sat beside him on the porch of the house that his father had built, on the land that no one was going to take, and let the boy have his silence. Boyd Calloway came back the next day. This time he didn't drive up to the house. He parked on the road outside the main gate, which he couldn't open, because Douglas had added a padlock after the first visit, and he stood outside the fence line and called out. Douglas got the notification on his phone before he heard the voice. The gate camera had triggered. He looked at the image. Calloway's truck, Calloway standing at the fence and behind him. Another man, younger, heavy-set, standing with his hands in his pockets. Douglas put his phone in his shirt pocket and walked out. "You're trespassing," he said from inside the fence. "I'm on the county road, right of way," Calloway said. "That's public property." He glanced at the camera on the gate post. "I see you've been busy. What do you want? I heard from a friend at the county that there's a minor child living on your property without proper legal documentation. He said it lightly, like a piece of interesting information rather than a threat that could be a concern. Child welfare authorities take those things seriously. Douglas felt the cold clarity come back. The arrangement is fully documented and has the consent of the child's father, he said. Jim Rayfield's office filed the paperwork yesterday. You're welcome to verify that with the county. Something flickered in Calloway's expression, a small recalibration. Smart, Calloway said. You move fast when you need to. I do. This isn't over, Douglas. I know it isn't. Douglas looked at him steadily. But it's also not going to go the way you want it to. This land isn't for sale. That child is not a leverage point. And every time you come here and make threats, implied or otherwise, there's a camera recording it and I'm writing it down. He paused. You want to keep doing this, I'll keep documenting. Or you could move on and find something else to spend your energy on. Calloway stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned, said something quiet to the man beside him, and got back in his truck. Douglas watched them drive away. His hands were steady. His breathing was steady. The camera on the gate post recorded the truck's departure and the time stamp logged automatically. He took out his phone and called Jim Rayfield. The paperwork go through? He asked. Filed this morning, Jim confirmed. You're covered, Douglas. Good. I'm going to email you a video from my gate camera in about 2 minutes. Calloway came by again. Implied he was going to report me to child welfare. Recorded? Every word. A pause. Good. Send it. I'll add it to the file. Jim, is there anything else I should be doing? Keep doing what you're doing. Document everything. Stay out of his face unless he comes to you, and trust the process. A beat. You doing okay? Douglas turned and looked back at the house. Through the kitchen window, he could see the shape of Caleb at the table, doing what looked like math, bent over something with a pencil, entirely focused. Yeah, Douglas said. I'm doing okay. The Sunday call with Ray Morrison happened at 10 o'clock, as it did every week, but this week Caleb asked Douglas to be on the call. The three of them sat at the kitchen table, Douglas's phone on speaker in the center, and it was the strangest and most serious conversation Douglas had been part of in years, conducted partly in the practical language of logistics and custody and paperwork, and partly in the unspoken language of a father and son navigating something neither of them had a roadmap for. Ray Morrison sounded sober, sounded clean, in fact, his voice clearer than the first call, steadier. He was 3 weeks into the outpatient program. He had a sponsor. He had gone back to work, light work, construction, just a few days a week so far, but he was working. The lawyer sent me the agreement, Ray said. I read it through twice. What did you think? Douglas asked. I think it's clean. I think it's what it says it is. A pause. I had a lawyer in Odessa look at it too. Buddy of mine. He said it was straightforward. It is. Doesn't take my rights. No. It documents that Caleb is in your custody, placed voluntarily with me in a supportive capacity, with your full knowledge and consent. You can terminate it anytime you want. In writing, 30 days notice. A long silence. Caleb, Ray said. You want to do this? Honestly, not what you think I want to hear. What do you want? Caleb had been sitting very straight during the whole call, his hands flat on the table. He looked at the phone for a moment before speaking. I want you to get better, Dad, he said. That's the thing I want most. And I think you need to do that without worrying about me every day, without me being something you feel guilty about. He paused. Mr. H. Harding is good people. This place is good, and Rio is healthy again. Another pause. I'm not leaving you behind. I'm just staying somewhere that works while you fix what needs fixing. The silence on Ray Morrison's end lasted long enough that Douglas found himself counting the seconds without meaning to. Okay, Ray Morrison finally said, and his voice had something rough and tender in it simultaneously, the voice of a man holding something precious that he knows he temporarily cannot carry. Okay, son, I'll sign it. Thank you, Dad. You call me if you need anything at all, I will. And Morrison men don't forget where they come from. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly, and he blinked once, hard. I know, Dad. I know that. After they hung up, the kitchen was very quiet. Margaret, who had been at the counter pretending to sort through invoices during the entire call, set down her folder and walked to the stove to put on a fresh pot of coffee. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Caleb looked at the phone in the center of the table for a long moment. Then he looked at Douglas. He meant it, he said. When he's sober, he always means it. I believe you. He's going to make it this time. I think he really is. I hope so, Douglas said. I genuinely do. Caleb nodded, and the thing he was holding behind his eyes, the complicated weight of loving someone who needed you to leave them so they could get better, settled into a quieter place. Not gone, not resolved, but manageable. Okay, he said. He pushed back from the table and stood up. I told Rhea I'd work him in the round pen this morning. He looked at Douglas. Want to watch? Yeah, Douglas said. I do. The weeks that followed had the quality of a slow, deliberate settling, the way land settles after rain, taking on new weight and finding new stability under it. Caleb enrolled in Marfa Middle School in late August in the 6th grade. The drive was 22 minutes from the ranch, and Douglas made it every morning with the focused purposefulness of a man who had decided something and was no longer second-guessing it. Caleb sat in the passenger seat with his backpack on his lap and usually ate something from the brown bag. Margaret had started leaving on the kitchen counter each night, a habit she had established without being asked and which no one discussed because to discuss it would have been to make it bigger than it needed to be. School was not easy. Caleb was behind in some areas. The patchwork of the last 14 months had left gaps, and the social dynamics of a new school in a small town had their own particular complications. But he was not a boy who expected things to be easy, and he was not a boy who confused difficulty with impossibility. He found a math teacher named Mr. Aldana, who recognized what he was dealing with and gave him extra time without making it a visible accommodation. He found, after about 3 weeks, a tentative friendship with a girl named Nora Weiss, who was equally serious and equally private, and who shared his interest in horses in a way that felt like more than coincidence. He did his homework at the kitchen table after the evening chores, working with the same methodical focus he brought to fence repair and cattle work. Douglas sat nearby on those evenings reading or going through ranch paperwork, and neither of them narrated what was happening. The ease of existing in the same room with another person without performance, because the ease itself was the thing, and saying it out loud would have made it smaller. Rio recovered fully. By September, he was carrying Caleb at a collected canter in the round pen, and by October they were riding the fence lines together. The paint horse and the boy moving through the West Texas landscape with a naturalness that looked like they had always belonged to it. The Boyd Calloway situation resolved itself with the particular quiet finality of things that simply run out of momentum. In mid-September, Deputy Anita Flores called Douglas with news. The investigation into the fence scudding had been expanded, and 2 of Calloway's ranch hands had given statements, apparently unhappy employees with their own grievances that directly linked Calloway to the deliberate damage. The Presidio County District Attorney had declined to file criminal charges on the current evidence, but Calloway had received a formal warning, and Jim Rayfield had sent a certified letter on Douglas's behalf outlining a civil liability claim that would be pursued if any further trespass or property damage occurred. The Black Ram 3500 had not come back down Route 67. Douglas didn't celebrate it. He noted it, documented it, and went back to work. Calloway backed off, he told Caleb one evening on the porch. Permanently, Caleb asked. Probably not permanently. Men like that don't usually give up on wanting what they want. But for now, yes. He paused. Some fights don't end in a dramatic finish, they just quiet down. You hold your ground long enough, and eventually the other person finds something easier. Caleb looked at the Cincinnati Mountains in the evening light. My mom used to say that the best way to beat someone who's trying to wear you down is to still be standing when they get tired. Your mom had a way with words. She had a way with everything, Caleb said simply, and smiled. Ray Morrison drove out to the Harding Ranch on a Saturday in October, not to take Caleb away, but to visit. He called ahead, he asked if it was all right, and he arrived in a clean truck at 2 in the afternoon, sober, clear-eyed, and visibly nervous. Douglas met him at the gate and shook his hand. Ray Morrison was 43, lean, with Caleb's coloring and something of Caleb's stillness, though on Ray it looked like stillness that had been hard-won rather than natural. He had the kind of handshake that told you exactly who a man was, firm, direct, over quickly. And Douglas thought, yes, I can see this man. I can see what he is and what he's working toward. Caleb came out of the barn when he heard the truck. He stopped at the barn door and looked at his father across the yard. Ray stopped walking. They looked at each other for a long moment, father and son, 30 feet apart, in the afternoon sun of a West Texas October, and Douglas turned away and went inside the house because some things are private and should be allowed to be. He made coffee. Margaret had left a peach cobbler on the counter that morning because she had apparently known Ray was coming, even though Douglas hadn't told her, which was the kind of thing Margaret did. 20 minutes later, Caleb came inside. He wants to see the ranch, he said. His eyes were bright and calm in a way that had both grief and happiness in it, which is the only way eyes look when things are actually okay, rather than just resolved. Is that all right? Of course, Douglas said. Take all the time you want. Caleb started back toward the door, then stopped. Douglas. Yeah. The boy turned around and looked at him from across the kitchen, small and serious, and entirely himself, standing in the afternoon light that came through the window above the sink. With his worn boots and his ranch-dirty hands, and his clear dark eyes that had already seen more than they should have needed to. Thank you, he said. Not just for today, for all of it. Douglas held his gaze for a moment. Then he said, thank you for asking for that water. Caleb blinked. Something moved across his face, understanding, and something warmer than understanding. I only asked for the dirty kind, he said, the runoff. I know what you asked for, Douglas said, and I know what I gave you instead. The afternoon stretched long over the Harding Ranch, the way October afternoons do in West Texas, golden and unhurried, with the mountains purple in the distance and the mesquite throwing long shadows, and the whole enormous sky carrying a quality of silence that isn't emptiness, but the opposite of it. Ray Morrison walked the fence lines with his son, listening to Caleb explain the difference between a tight wire and a loose one, between a post set with care and one set in a hurry. He listened with the focused attention of a man trying to receive everything, to take back in his hands what he'd put down and understand its full weight. Douglas watched from the porch with a cup of coffee going cold in his hand. Margaret sat beside him, as she occasionally did in the late afternoon, when the paperwork was done and there was nothing left to manage. He's going to be all right, she said, not asking. Yes, Douglas agreed. He is. Both of them. Yeah. He watched the man and the boy moving along the fence line in the distant pasture. Two small figures against the enormous land, both of them. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then, and you? Douglas looked at the live oak trees his mother had planted 60 years ago, their roots now so deep in this ground that nothing short of the end of the world could pull them out. He looked at the mountains that had been here before his family arrived and would be here long after. He looked at the photograph he'd brought outside that morning and set on the porch railing, Nathan, grinning on the fence rail, the summer light on his face. He thought about a boy appearing at a gate in the worst of the July heat, asking permission to use the water no one needed, the runoff, the waste, making himself as small as possible so as not to burden anyone with his actual need. He thought about opening the gate. I'm good, Douglas Harding said. and meant it in the full and complicated way that good means when you've earned it, when it isn't the absence of grief or loss or difficulty, but the presence of something worth the weight of all three. He picked up his coffee and drank it cold, and the West Texas afternoon held them all in its enormous golden light: the old rancher, and the ranch manager, and the father trying to find his way back, and the boy who had ridden 30 miles for a drink of dirty water, and found at the end of that road something nobody had promised him. Something clean, something true, something worth keeping.